Hey Star Trek fans, welcome to another episode review for Star Trek Discovery, this time for episode 5 of the series, Choose Your Pain. Captain Lorca is at a strategy session at a Federation starbase, and while en route back to Discovery is captured by Klingons. Commander Saru, temporarily in command of Discovery, is tasked with finding and rescuing Captain Lorca. Burnham has concerns about the Tardigrade as it seems very taxed every time they use the spore drive. She brings those concerns to Saru, who dismisses them due to the urgency of needing to rescue Captain Lorca as soon as possible. Dr. Culber examines the Tardigrade and concurs with Burnham's assessment that the Tardigrade is being depleted by continued use in the spore drive. Burnham, Stamets, and Tilly begin exploring alternative options to the Tardigrade, but in the meantime, Captain Lorca's position is discovered and Saru orders a jump to that location. The jump is successful, but subsequently the Tardigrade enters a hibernation-type state, a reaction to the adverse conditions that it has been placed under. Meanwhile, aboard a Klingon prison ship, Captain Lorca meets his cellmate, Harcourt Fenton Mudd, a name that longtime Star Trek fans may just remember, portrayed by Roger C. Carmel in the original series episodes Mudd's Women, I, Mudd, and the animated series episode Mudd's Passion. Also in the prison cell is the latest addition to Star Trek Discovery's main cast. We finally get to meet Lieutenant Ash Tyler, played by Shazad Latif. However, is it possible that we might have met this character before already? Check out the linked video for a theory about Lieutenant Ash Tyler and his possible alter ego. Captain Lorca is tortured by the captain of the Klingon vessel, whom we have met in previous episodes. It is L'Rell, who was T'Kuvma's battledeck commander in the first 2 episodes of Star Trek Discovery. Lorca and Tyler discover that Harry Mudd has been spying on them and providing intelligence to the Klingons, and when the 2 of them manage to escape their cell, they opt not to take Harry Mudd with them. The 2 Starfleet officers fight their way to the launch bay and escape in a Klingon raider just in time to make it back to Discovery. After rescuing Lorca and their newest crew member, Saru orders Stamets to engage the spore drive and have them escape. However, despite having been ordered to prep the Tardigrade to be able to make them jump, Stamets has instead disobeyed that order and utilized a gene therapy solution that he, Burnham, and Tilly had come up with earlier in order to make himself viable to use the spore drive in the Tardigrade's place. The jump is successful and Discovery escapes, and Stamets seems to be okay despite his slightly maniacal laugh upon discovering that they have successfully gotten away. Saru and Burnham come to an understanding, and Saru reinstates Burnham to active duty after having earlier relieved her of duty for disobeying his orders, and issues new orders to her: save the life of the Tardigrade. She does so by allowing it to escape Discovery, and the Tardigrade utilizes the mycelial network to escape and depart for parts unknown. Stamets and Culber enjoy a tender moment in their quarters following this pretty taxing incident, but following their conversation we are left with an entirely new mystery when the reflection of Paul Stamets seems to linger in the mirror long after he himself has walked away. Is this some sort of side effect of being tied to the spore drive? Hopefully we will find out in a future episode. For now, it's a particularly chilling moment on which to end this episode. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about the characters in this episode, starting with Captain Lorca. Now, we get some hints early in the episode that there's a little bit more to Lorca's backstory than we've heard before. In the scene with the Admiral where it's just him one-on-one, the Admiral says something along the lines of, "Why give everyone another reason to judge you?" Another reason, what does that mean? So what happened, and why in particular has Lorca been given so much power to wage this war? It seems as though he's got more power than the typical Starfleet captain, and they make mention of this a couple of times.
Are you uncomfortable with the power I've been given, Admiral?
I'm your friend.
Later in the episode, we get another hint about this when Mudd tells Lorca, "Stick with me, I'm a survivor, just like you." And the expression on Lorca's face tells us that he knows what Mudd is referring to. Mudd later attempts to drive a wedge between Lorca and Tyler by talking a little bit about the past that we've been getting hints about. He talks about Lorca's last command, the USS Buran. Apparently, the ship was destroyed with all hands aboard, and Lorca was the only survivor, kind of flying in the face of the idea that a captain goes down with his ship. Lorca himself admits that what actually happened was he destroyed his ship, killing his crew to prevent them from being captured by the Klingons, a fate that he felt was worse than death. Honestly, at this point, I'm not sure what to think of Lorca. I suspect there's a lot more to this story than what we've been told. There would have to be, and hopefully we'll get to see that either in a flashback or in further revelations later on. But the story on the face of it does make Lorca look very bad. And finally, the last thing I want to talk about with this episode with regards to Lorca is his decision to leave Harry Mudd behind in the Klingon prison. I know Mudd is a despicable character. We'll get to him in a few minutes here. But to leave him behind on the Klingon ship is, to me, a bit of an indefensible action. I mean, he's still a Federation citizen. Why would you leave him in the hands of the Klingons? Plus, tactically, it would make sense to take him along. Watching this scene for the first time, I was genuinely surprised that Lorca did not eventually relent and take Mudd with him. It certainly did seem strange to me that he stuck to his guns and left him in the cell. Additionally, with regards to the title of this episode, Choose Your Pain, we learn that that comes from the Klingon practice for their prisoners aboard this ship to have them choose their pain. That is, either take a beating themselves or choose a fellow prisoner to take the beating for them. This is described as a way to discourage any sort of bonding between the prisoners. It turns out that this title has a kind of double meaning when it comes to Captain Lorca. We learn towards the end of the episode that the incident in which he lost the USS Buran and its crew was also the incident in which his eyesight was damaged. Part of the reason he hasn't gotten it completely repaired is to remind himself of the pain of that incident. In effect, choosing his pain, choosing to keep that pain as a reminder of what happened. It's an interesting insight into this multi-layered character. Again, I'm not quite sure what my feelings towards this guy are at this point, however. Speaking of Mudd, he is of course the character that we saw in the original series and the animated series, returned here. Now, when this was first announced that Rainn Wilson would be playing Harry Mudd in Star Trek Discovery, I was a little bit wary. I wasn't sure. I was never really a big fan of the character, and I was thinking that maybe bringing him back just for the sake of tying it to continuity would be a bit of a mistake. However, I do have to say, I am going to go ahead here and praise Rainn Wilson's performance as Mudd. There was just enough of a channeling of Roger C. Carmel's original performance, as well as what he brought to the role himself, that made this really interesting to watch. Some of his lines are perfectly delivered, and I do have to admit, against my better judgment, I was laughing a couple of times with Mudd in the scene. So, props to the writers and to Rainn Wilson in particular for performing very well as Harcourt Fenton Mudd. Also, really nice name drop of Stella, of course, his wife, seen in android form in the original series. The final scene with Mudd in this episode tells me that this is not the last we have seen of him, and I think the decision of Lorca to leave him behind is going to come back and bite him in the ass. I think Mudd is going to be a thorn in Lorca's side in the future, as well, of course, a thorn in James T. Kirk's side in the years to come. Which brings us to the last of the trio in the Klingon prison cell, and that, of course, is Lieutenant Ash Tyler. I am very suspicious of this guy. Now, there are several clues in this episode that not all is on the up and up with this lieutenant. We learn that he was captured 7 months earlier in the battle at the Binary Stars, and that, according to him, he has survived so long because the captain of the ship has taken a special liking to him and is kind of using him as her plaything. Now, we know that this can't be the case because 7 months ago, and for the past 6 months, following the battle at the Binary Stars, L'Rell, who is the captain of this ship, was on T'Kuvma's ship, and could not have been on this prison ship with Lieutenant Ash Tyler this whole time. As I mentioned earlier in this video, I made a video earlier this week about a particular theory that's floating around on the internet about the identity of Lieutenant Ash Tyler. Could he actually be the Klingon albino from the previous episode's Vok, undercover and possibly an augmented Klingon human DNA augment virus thing to get undercover and get aboard Discovery? I don't know. I mean, there are things that definitely contribute to me thinking that that theory could be true, but there are also things that possibly make it so that it can't be true. Watch the video, decide for yourself, and yeah, I'd love to hear from you. What do you think of this theory? Do you think this could be true? Anyway, moving on. Next, I want to talk a little bit about Commander Saru. In this episode, we get an interesting B-plot in which he has his first command. He's left in command of the Discovery while Captain Lorca is captured, and he's very concerned about his performance and how he comports himself. While it's easy to criticize a lot of the decisions he makes, I actually think that Saru took a very good turn in command here. He's in a very difficult position here, responsible for rescuing his captain, as well as for the crew of the Discovery that he must protect. While the concerns about the health and safety of the tardigrade are very real, Saru sees it as his responsibility to look past that to the bigger picture. In the course of the episode, we get another couple of really great scenes between Saru and Burnham. It's pretty clear that the writers love writing these two together, and I can see why. It's really ripe with storytelling potential. These are two really great characters that play amazingly well off of each other. The scene in engineering where Saru reprimands Burnham and has her confined to quarters is really powerful. And this one moment, I watched this with a bunch of friends of mine, we had an audible gasp when Saru said this.
Saving this tardigrade will neither bring back nor change the fact that this is exactly the kind of behavior that killed Captain Giorgio.
Saru has indeed fulfilled his promise to Burnham in episode 3 when he said that he would do whatever it takes to protect the life of his captain, and that he would do a better job of it than Burnham did of protecting Giorgio. And finally, they're seen at the end of the episode as well, when Saru and Burnham come to a bit of an understanding and Saru orders Burnham to save the life of the tardigrade, was very, very touching. I loved the discussion between the two of them regarding his jealousy over the time that Burnham was able to spend with Captain Giorgio as her first officer. If you have read the Star Trek Discovery novel Desperate Hours, that adds an even greater layer to this scene, in that Saru and Burnham were both up for the first officer position, and Burnham eventually won it over Saru, and you can totally see where that kind of conflict between them came from, and how it has gotten to the point where it has here. Cadet Tilly is, as usual, a delight in this episode, and I have to say, I really, contrary to some opinions on the internet, my personal opinion, I loved her becoming the first Star Trek character to drop an F-bomb. Also, you have to kind of understand the context. She's not using it in anger or malice. She's not telling someone to F off or to go F themselves or anything like that. She's saying that this is really fucking cool. And you know what? It kind of is. I gotta give them a bit of a pass on this one. It was actually a really great moment. I felt it very fitting for her character for that to happen, and she does express embarrassment and surprise immediately after, apologizing for using the language she did, which brings us to Lieutenant Stamets, who has the distinction of dropping the second F-bomb in all of Star Trek history.
So sorry.
No, Cadet. It is fucking cool.
Let's do it.
Lieutenant Stamets, of course, as usual, is another highlight of this episode. I really love his scientific mind and how he's approaching the problem here, and his ultimate decision to possibly sacrifice himself in order to spare the life of the tardigrade is really touching. And the moment where Saru finds him in the containment chamber, thankfully alive, and after he informs him that the Discovery got away and that it worked, his maniacal laughter is really interesting. Almost a little kind of scary, but at the same time, a really great moment here. I also love the moment between him and Culber in their quarters at the end of the episode. And of course, I would be remiss if I didn't mention another huge first here in Star Trek history. This is the first toothbrushing scene in all of Star Trek, as far as I can remember anyway. I love the tenderness between these two characters. I think, honestly, they make a really cute couple, and the closeness between them is definitely something to note. I loved this line in particular.
I also knew you'd leave me if I let anything else endanger that creature.
Oh, so you do listen to me?
Not really. You sold that with a look.
And finally, we get our big mystery with which to end the episode. After Stamets turns away from the mirror, we see his mirror image lingering in the mirror for a few seconds before walking away. This was really unnerving and a really WTF moment. So what is going on here? What's with this mirror image? And when we think of the word mirror in Star Trek, does this possibly mean what we think it means? I guess only time will tell. Please leave a comment. What do you think about this scene? What do you think is going to happen? What do you think the implications are? I'm assuming this is because Stamets has utilized himself in the spore drive and he's tied himself to that somehow. I'm thinking this is a side effect of that, but what does it mean? Finally, I want to end this video by talking about some of the continuity touchstones and Easter eggs in this episode, and there were quite a few. Of course, very early in the episode, we get a mention of the engagements that Discovery has taken part in. Corvan 2, of course, which we saw in the previous episode. Benzar, which is the home planet of the Benzites, seen in 2 episodes of TNG and 1 episode of Deep Space Nine. And the Ophiuchus system, which was mentioned in the original series episode Mudd's Women. The women that Mudd is transporting in that episode are originally meant to wive settlers in the Ophiuchus system. Next up, in one of my favorite bits in Star Trek Discovery thus far, Saru asks the computer to list Starfleet's most decorated captains, and we get a list of them. Robert April, who was, of course, captain of the Enterprise 1701, the first captain of that ship, seen in the animated series episode The Counterclock Incident. Jonathan Archer, the commanding officer of Earth's first Warp 5 starship, Enterprise NX-01, as seen in Star Trek Enterprise. Matthew Decker, who is seen as a Commodore in the episode The Doomsday Machine, commanding the USS Constellation, NCC 1017. Philippa Georgiou, of course, captain of the USS Shenzhou from the first 2 episodes of Discovery. And finally, Christopher Pike, who is the current, at this time, captain of the Enterprise 1701 and the immediate predecessor of James T. Kirk. We get a close look at this star map, which includes several planets and bases from continuity. First, Akamar, which is from the Next Generation episode The Vengeance Factor. The Korea system, which in the 2-part Next Generation episode Birthright is home to a Romulan prison camp with several Klingon inhabitants left over from the attack on Khitomer. Deep Space K7, which is the space station from the episode The Trouble with Tribbles. Morska and Rura Penthe, which are both originally from Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country. Rura Penthe is the Klingon prison planet that Bones and Kirk are imprisoned on, and Morska is a listening post that contacts the Enterprise as they're trying to race to Rura Penthe to save them. And finally, Beta Lancal and Mempa, which are both featured in the Next Generation 2-parter Redemption, mentioned as being in Klingon space and the site of various battles and fleet groupings. There's another one, a blink and you'll miss it moment, when they're comparing the DNA of various species to see if one is compatible with the spore drive. Just before the panel clears, we see that they're looking at Zaldan DNA. Now, Zaldans are an apparently argumentative people who respect shows of strength rather than weakness, and you may remember the Next Generation episode Coming of Age, in which Wesley Crusher is tested by seeing how he reacts to a Zaldan in a confrontation in the corridor. They are apparently notable for having webbed fingers, which is how you identify a Zaldan. So, were there any Easter eggs or continuity references that I missed? Please let me know in the comments. Also, what did you think of the episode Choose Your Pain? Sound off in the comments below. I do read every comment and try to respond to as many as I can. Thank you so much for watching this video. Please like, share, and subscribe. You can follow me on Facebook, Instagram, Reddit, and Twitter. Links are all in the description below. Look out for my review next week of the next Star Trek Discovery episode, Lethe. In the meantime, thank you so much for watching. Have a great week, and I'll see you in the next video. Live long and prosper.